If you don't know me, my name is Carrie Kopnick, and I serve the Chaplaincy Institute as our community minister. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our monthly ChI Talks. It's an event that explores facets of spirituality through an interfaith lens with our ChI community. You know, because you clicked the button, that we're recording our session today, but if you wish not to be on camera, just turn off your video and your image won't appear in the recording. You can ask questions if you need to during the time in the chat, but we will have some open time at the end for questions about today's topic or about the Chaplaincy Institute in general. And just a little bit about who we are. The Chaplaincy Institute Seminary provides education for people who are seeking to serve in hospitals, hospices, as disaster chaplains, in prisons, in corporations, in the military and the VA. We serve activists and people who are eco-ministries serving in environmental contexts. We also train spiritual leaders to serve as spiritual companions in our spiritual direction certificate program. The ChI Interfaith Community is our ecclesiastical endorsing body, or our faith group endorsing body, and it is the oldest and most respected ordaining body in the United States. Our endorsement is recognized, the only interfaith one that's recognized by the Association of Professional Chaplains, the Veterans Administration, and the military. Let me take just a moment to introduce our speakers today, Reverend Margaret and Reverend Lily. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Reverend Margaret Northall is an ordained interfaith and interspiritual chaplain. Sorry. I just put everything in the wrong place on my screen, and this is the one thing I need to actually say, so hold on. There we go. An ordained interspiritual chaplain, spiritual guide, and doula who accompanies individuals through life's sacred transitions with compassion, presence, and respect. Through deep listening and ritual, Margaret honors the uniqueness of every journey to reclaim dignity in perinatal loss. Her experience as a maternal, child, and pediatric RN informs her guidance dealing with disenfranchised grief. Reverend Lily Godsoe, drawing on her board experience as a spiritual care practitioner, she has supported individuals and families navigating perinatal grief and loss. In 2023, she co-facilitated the workshop Reclaiming Dignity in Perinatal Loss with Reverend Margaret Northall at the Parliament of the World's Religions. Lily brings a compassionate, grounding presence, creating sacred space for people to honor their grief and move toward healing and hope. Thank you so much. Let's take a moment with our speakers and sacred circle here to begin.
Thank you. As we begin reclaiming dignity in silenced perinatal grief, we're going to have Lily do an introduction. So it's a brief, not really a guided meditation, but just to bring yourselves to be present here. So,
Margaret, we can't hear you very well.
It seems to me that I'm doing my best to work with my speakers, and it says it's on 100%. So I'll try my best to speak really loud. But at this point, we're just going to have an opening with Lily, so we can become grounded and begin our session together. So Lily.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be with you today. Thank you for welcoming us, Carrie, to this space, this ChI space, and it's an honor to be back to share with you a little bit what Margaret and I have co-created together these last couple of years. So I invite you now just to find a place within yourself for a few moments to let go of technical issues, let go of the day, leave it outside the door. You can pick it up after we're through today. And let's come to mind and heart to reflect on this very tender subject of perinatal grief and loss. Each new life, no matter how fragile or brief, forever changes the world. And that's by an ancient Chinese poet, ChI. Each new life, no matter how fragile or brief, forever changes the world. And now I'm going to do an interpretation of the Tara chant on my native flute. Margaret, shall I go ahead and share the... Okay, one moment. Are you able to see it, Margaret?
Yes.
Okay.
We can move on to the outline.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, we're going to start our presentation today, just letting you know how we're going to approach this very tender subject. Again, just so grateful that you're all here to explore this with us. We want to together explore how we can honor the grief that's been silenced and restore dignity to those who have carried the invisible loss, oftentimes invisible loss of perinatal loss. We want to, for sure, emphasize the interfaith and inclusive context that grief transcends religion, culture, and belief. And we're here to remember that grief is not a problem to solve, but a sacred process to accompany. So we'll do that in these three main ways. We're going to explore the dimensions of perinatal grief and loss, share about our critical insights, Margaret and I, on how to meet and support people in their grief journey, and then offer you an outline of a spiritual ritual for healing.
Thank you, Lily. And before I continue on, I want to be very clear that the conversation today is not about your beliefs in pro-life, pro-anything. It is about spiritual care, and it's about a spiritual journey and honoring women in their spiritual aspects of being carrying or losing a child. So it's of course, when we say the word the unique landscapes of loss, we're talking about abortion. Abortion is a very broad umbrella term for spontaneous abortion. It can, many ways of that, and you'll see as we go further into this conversation today that it is about the sacredness of the soul entering into the world and how to deal with that loss. It's about sacredness of life. Of course, miscarriage, intrauterine fetal demise. Sometimes it's a stillborn, and stillborn that could be viable after 27 weeks. Some other perinatal losses, surrogacy, adoption, donor, IVF. Sometimes it's a twin birth, a premature birth, and a loss of one of the twins. There are a lot of disenfranchised grief situations in transgender pregnancies. And so each of these perinatal losses carry a very unique journey, so that recognizing the event is considered as a perinatal loss very much of its own journey and its own landscape. And that really requires, some very deep and careful listening. And today is what I'm presenting is to offer tools to spiritual directors, to counselors, to chaplains who may find themselves with people confiding in them, and where we'll go with this. So just to go to the next slide, we'll just do a broad overview of some of the critical insights that we have discovered and are discussing. Go ahead, Lily.
Right, so our critical insights include the awareness of a sacred contract, the sacred contract between the mother and the unborn, or the born, who is then faces demise. And we will also talk about how typically this type of loss is something called a disenfranchised loss. And a disenfranchised loss is something that is a loss that is not usually recognized by general population. It's a hidden loss, and perinatal loss is usually falls under that category. And then we'll talk about reclaiming dignity. So the reclaiming dignity is essentially meeting people in that disenfranchised place and restoring their dignity by truly exploring their loss with them and honoring their grief. And a roadmap toward honoring the grief is one model is the tier model, and I'll speak briefly to that towards the end of the presentation. So next, Margaret is going to talk about her views of the sacred contract.
So some years ago, maybe as many as 10 years ago, I was in Damanhur and in the temple, and one of the temples it's the Hall of Water. And you go into the temple, it's very much like being in the womb. And I was brought to the understanding by receiving the information from my guides about what it is and what happens in the sacred contract of a being formed as a spark of the divine, as with the intention to incarnate. And there was a long soul process of guides gathered as this, of course, at that point, essence of soul is choosing to incarnate and actually choosing a mother to incarnate through. And so in doing so, this is what the part of the sacred contract is. It's way before the mother is actually conscious of it, and way before a discovery of an actual pregnancy being present. And so the sacred contract is where I see sacred sovereignty of honoring the mother and the inherent dignity of her personhood and the right to choose what happens with her unborn, so that the contract is fulfilled if the pregnancy is fulfilled. And there is also a very amazing understanding that I would have got the insight that should it be for a brief few 12 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever weeks it is a life that is completed. Sometimes that soul just needs to dip into incarnation for a brief moment in time and at that juncture, their blueprint and the reason that they incarnated is complete. Of course, we know that this is not on a physical and an earth plane level entirely clear to anyone, because that's not where people are living. You're living in the physical world, having the emotional reactions, psychological reactions, and physical engagement with, being pregnant. But, I just wanted to point out that I was brought to the understanding that there is the sovereignty of the mother, and sometimes, with a loss, it just means that that child couldn't stay and the life was complete. So it doesn't matter how many weeks or how many days or exactly when that life ended. There is a motherhood occurs, and there is always a relationship, because the 8 fetal cells that start in the womb at conception do remain there. So we'll come back to talking about that relationship when we talk about healing. But Lily will take us into the disenfranchised loss at this point.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Margaret. And I just want to say how even hearing you speak about it today, it's just so inspiring. And I remember, the day that you shared your inspired view on the sacred contract and how this really was the beginning of our work together on this very tender subject. And I know as you're speaking again, I'm really getting that, when we honor both the sacred relationship and the sovereignty, we really are restoring wholeness to the story. And I just really appreciate that, and how much already you have lived into honoring this sacred contract with so many women and their families. So thank you. Disenfranchised loss, as I mentioned earlier, it's a loss that society does not universally acknowledge or validate. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I'll go over them briefly. And the disenfranchised grief, it's a grief that, because of the loss being disenfranchised, the grief cannot be expressed, openly acknowledged, socially validated, or publicly supported. And so it happens when the relationship is not recognized. And we just had Margaret talking about that sacred contract. The loss itself is not recognized, and the griever herself is not recognized. So some of the reasons why perinatal grief is often disenfranchised is because of shame, societal discomfort or blame surrounding miscarriage or abortion, criminalization, legal and moral stigma in reproductive contexts. Margaret and I first started talking about this subject while we were away on retreat with Megan, actually in Crete, and we were really feeling just inspired by the feminine, the divine feminine, and what was arising for us, and the story that Margaret was sharing. And then we got news while we were there that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And we thought, this is more important than ever that we start exploring this material more and figuring out ways to support folks who are encountering this type of loss. So criminalization seems to be, I've shot to the forefront of why this is a disenfranchised grief. Of course, there's cultural biases. We have an absence of public rituals or recognition for unseen losses. And we're attempting to restore that in our own small way here with our presentation, and hopefully sharing more about our ritual that we've co-created. And then another reason, of course, is the patriarchy, that prioritizes reproduction over personhood, silencing women's autonomy. So the result is an invisible grief where there is no sovereignty, there is no relational peace, and the message is there's just an overall negative bias landing squarely on women, and wherever they find themselves in the reproductive loss, there is seemingly a distinct bias on each loss, where the blame goes unfairly to the woman and her family. So I think that's all I'll say about that for now. So Margaret will now bring us into how we help women reclaim their dignity in face of their loss.
Thank you, Lily. And when I present these tools, I'm speaking of um, a, a general model that we came up with, but for if you're a chaplain, so say for example, and you're working in a NICU or maternal child health, you would need to adapt exactly how this is for in the moment, especially for the emotional, psychological, psychospiritual situation that you're in. And you'll see, when I talk about how to do a grief ritual, and that this is very, very sensitive, as well as reclaiming dignity. We're also including sometimes when there's been a known pregnancy and there are partners. Um, at the Parliament of the World Religions, we came across and went to one of the sessions and were able to interact with men and women on a different angle of this kind of loss. And I've since explored that, and there's a tremendous unspoken grief, and men don't really have an opportunity to express that because women and their friends, if they knew, would sympathize. But for men, oh, your wife lost a baby, oh, so sorry, but they don't really see that there's a tremendous loss for the man as well. And I'm actually doing quite a bit of work these days, having those conversations when I can with men, and I've just found it, yes, the disenfranchised grief for men is huge. So, but in the moment when I've been in my experience of working in the hospital and as a chaplain in reproductive health, and when I've been in my work as a pediatric nurse, these are some of the things that I we kind of put together in a toolbox. So at first, the acknowledgement that no matter what happened on that day, at that time, you became a mother. And there's no changing that. It's about the same as your birth. And to have those emotions around that event be honored. And there needs to be a huge sense of acknowledging courage to carry this through, and to become aware of of being pregnant. And then if you were pregnant and were aware of the baby, whether this was in a few weeks or if it was far along, losing the baby, there's such an importance in naming the baby. And I think we've just lost the
Yeah,
slide,
sorry. Yep.
We'll be back. I'll
Okay,
continue.
yeah, please.
And then and always to be mindful. So if you're with somebody and they've experienced a loss, a baby perinatal loss of some kind or another that we have spoken about, it's so important to offer a blessing and to be inclusive of who is present and who would like that. I've experienced sometimes that the mom herself is not ready for it, but sometimes the partner is there and is ready for it. So to be a very careful, deeply sensitive listener, and also offer, if it's possible, for disposal of the cremains or the remains. And there are some cemeteries in the Bay Area that I know of that will do, infant loss and infant burial, even if I know if it's anything less than, even under 20 weeks, they offer a space. So that's something really good to know, that there is a place to do that if they wanted to do that. And then, of course, creating a sacred space for remembrance. If you're a chaplain sitting with somebody in that space in a NICU or meeting with them, it's just to be spontaneous and somehow just really honor the space, create a sacred space, call in the guides, call in support, and address the physical aspects of, and after just being with it, being there with them spiritually for a while, it's also important to address the physical aspects of recovery. there's been a delivery, there's a change in the womb. The initial period is 8 weeks, and usually I would go through what to expect in the physical recovery, if you're able to name that. But the other part I also speak about recovery is like an emotional recovery. So to write down the date of the event, like today's date, if it was today, to write down a date 8 weeks from now, and 6 months from now, and a year from now, just as a reminder of stepping stones of acknowledgement, and just to even ask 2 months from now, how am I doing? 6 months from now, how am I doing? And also creating an important way, even now, if you wanted to memorialize, and how to create a sacred space to create a remembrance. Sometimes that has to actually happen in secret, because people sometimes can't tell anyone that they've had a loss. And also how to provide some support for the family and partner, and just to ask those questions, what do you need right now? And was this important to you? And those questions are so important. And also just to individually, for each of the partners, if they're present and together, just honoring and staying safe in their journey, so that guiding them how they can share this journey together. And sometimes it would be a good idea for them, if it's maybe a premature baby's loss, that I often advise parents to find counseling separately and together, and plan on doing that for some months to come. And for them to know that, without having to acknowledge it to anyone, if you are the trusted spiritual care provider or spiritual director, that you don't have to walk this path alone, because today you're being given some tools of how to approach this and how to accompany people. And so we'll go on to the roadmap to healing. So Lily, will you introduce that for us? Lily, I'm not hearing your voice.
Thank you. Just going to go over this briefly, because I know we want to be mindful of the time. But every chaplain, spiritual care counselor, provider, I recommend having a grief theory that you work with that helps you meeting any kind of loss. One that I use is frequently is the TIER model, William Worden, and it does go nicely or fit this scenario as well, to help support people in this type of loss. And the first stage or phase or step of healing is to help the griever accept the reality of the loss. And Margaret was just showing us ways that we can help the griever fully connect and accept the loss. Making a date and having a plan, and we're going to go over a couple of more at the next slide. This helps the griever to face the truth of the loss and accept the loss, which helps both honor the loss and the love that was there, and continues on. The next stage or phase would be to experience the pain of the loss. We help the griever have permission to feel the fullness of their emotion, to have a sacred lament, And this is where grief rituals would be important to help someone really have a sense of moving through their grief and having a sense of support through that. A in the tier is to adjust to a new environment. This is slowly exploring their new identity as an individual who now has lost a child, or has made a choice to not pursue that pregnancy. And then the R part of the tier model is to reinvest in the new reality. So it's a transformation, going from the grief to a meaning making process. So all along the way, the chaplain can meet the griever at each stage to help them complete those grieving tasks, so they can not get stuck there and feel the fullness of their grief and fully honor the experience that they had. So now we're going to look at some spiritual care tools that Margaret touched on before, but we're going to these are some ways that we can help the griever go through those stages of grief. So most importantly, we're asking about the memories. We're really reclaiming the relationship, the relationality that was there inherently at the time of conception and throughout however long the pregnancy was. So as Margaret was saying, as we were had those tools earlier, these are some more questions for practitioners to help the griever realize the nuances of their relationship with the child that died. So, and in these questions, there could be a lot of other pockets of anger or disappointment, sadness. And to ask these questions would be to help, help further process the grief and find a way to meaning making. Do you want to say anything about these, Margaret?
Yes, I just want to say that this process is extremely individual, so it's very important to listen to the narrative. And why I say that is sometimes you may be sitting with somebody in a sacred conversation and they're in their 70s, 80s, in their senior years, and this disenfranchised grief still can just crop up and it's unresolved. And you find out, they never ever told a soul. They may have gone on to have an entire family beyond that, and this has never been dealt with. So the most important part of this is that it needs the support to facilitate the grief counseling in a very tailored way and very, very make it very meaningful for the reporter. So as I said, this is a very broad spectrum here because some of these are maybe, healing the past, a lot of past, it's not always in the present. And, and people have maybe gone on, something they chose to end a pregnancy, they were in college, they just couldn't manage, but, at a future date, were they conflicted or, were they disappointed or did they would they have liked to have made a different decision? It's just different tools to help people and have the conversation and introduce the conversation with compassion and listen very carefully of how the story is told, so that you are tailoring it exactly to what's needed in the moment. And I would trust that you are, being guided by spirit to be in that situation at that moment. And, the exact how it will play out, I trust that it will play out well, but having the tools of how to go about it, in your back pocket, and just know this reference is really what my delight is today to share with you. And so, that being said, I'll have Lily introduce the ritual, and I'll go through the ritual. Of course, we don't have time to do the ritual, and it's not appropriate to do it here, but I will just share with you the elements of the ritual. So let's have the next slide. And can you tell us about the slide, Lily?
No. First of all, that was so beautifully said, Margaret. Thank you so much for what you just was sharing with all of us. Yeah, this slide this image is a picture of our altar that we co-created at the Parliament to invite people into the ritual that we did there, to honor all perinatal losses, whether personally or with loved ones, and people that we care for. It's got some beautiful images on it and a lot of light, and a lot of those beautiful crystal hearts, pink crystal hearts that everyone left with that day. And yeah, so that's a little, and then I think another wonderful feature is that collage there that you have, Margaret, that's I think you also have behind you. Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a very personal piece of Margaret's to honor her loss. Yeah, in the ritual, it's meet, mend, and memorialize. It sums up our approach to offer this ritual to help people who are grieving. And meeting is primarily, coming together, remembering that soul that once touched our life in the physical. And the mending was the ritual itself of communing with that soul, and a way to, in sacred space, silently communicate any gratitude or sorrow, or anything at all that would come up for the person in that sacred space. And then, of course, to memorialize them, we went through a ritual exchange with the altar, where at the end the griever was able to take one of those hearts. And it was a very beautiful ritual that really touched on all the dimensions that we spoke about during this presentation. And I just want to say, I just want to lift up that what Margaret was talking about, listening in for the narrative for each griever's story, because each grief is unique, even though today we're talking about a subset of grief, perinatal loss. Of course, we are meeting each griever in a unique circumstance and in a unique time of life, and et cetera. And this ritual, I think, helps to meet that type of loss, but yet leave room for people to have their own experience, spiritual experience in the ritual. So I think if you are interested in knowing more about this ritual, Margaret and I are more than happy to talk with you down the road sometime, to explore ways that we can facilitate a ritual for you, or share our approach, our best practices, and keep the conversation going. So, did you want to add anything else, Margaret?
No, I think that's beautifully said. And yes, absolutely. I can just demonstrate some of the, we just have a feather.
Oh, and the
here.
feather.
The feather, and just to start out, the feather is a representation of that little angel that was, briefly here. And we used the ritual, used it in the beginning of the ritual, and eventually the feather sort of morphed into being able to take a heart from the from the center. And the crystal heart, I mean, this rose quartz is has healing properties, and it's something that you can carry with you. It's something that you can carry with you unobtrusively. Only you would know, the carrier would know what it's all about. So it's something that you could offer to someone, and other than creating a memorial, I can really talk to you about how to create memorials that are unobtrusive but meaningful, and those are all individuals. So there's a lot more conversation around that, but I just would love to use the rest of the time right now just to answer some questions, because I'm sure there are questions in the chat.
There are some questions in the chat, and I'll say Jackie had to leave, but she is a board certified pediatric chaplain who has developed assessment tools for children. So on the cutting edge, we're so lucky to have her as a student in our community, which so much to learn from her. And then Wakil, do you want to say just a little bit about what you've done with your End of Life Conversations podcast around
Yeah, thank you. The we had some folks on. I just reached out to them again after this to see if they're still doing this, but there were some death doulas who had put together a support group specifically for child loss, and it included all the things we've talked about here, but as well as incarceration, estrangement, mental health issues, whatever. I'm not sure they're still doing it. I went to the link they had and it didn't look like it was there, so I'm going to try to find that for everybody, and I'll share that if I do. But I just really, and the person who left, I'd love to have her come and be on our podcast and talk about that as well. But we would love to have any of you join us, and you folks who are sharing this today, yeah, take a look at the podcast. We'd love to have you come and speak more about this. It's something that it's a subject that is really important to our audience and to many people. So thank you for sharing this. And there's links in the chat.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And then Wakil replied, but Linda asked if there are grief support groups for fetal loss and suggestions for rituals. And you talked about this ritual, but just turn that over to you, support groups.
Could I add on to that a little bit? Because I work in a hospital in North Carolina, and thankfully we can still do this. But usually I'm called as the chaplain to go in, and maybe I'm seeing the mother and the father or somebody else. And so I'm also looking for rituals that can be done. I can put things in my pocket or my bag and show up and do it right then and there. What we have done is I have cards, and I'll write a card to them, and we have some ceramic hearts, and I put a ceramic heart in it. But I'm just kind of wondering what else you might suggest.
Well, I'll invite you, and love to have a Zoom meeting with you, and we can spend time talking about that, because during my pediatric career and NICU career over the years in that area where you're ministering, yes, I do have a variety of of things that you could do, and it probably could help you create some things. So perhaps just reach out to me at my on my website, margaretnorthall.com, or just reach out to me by email. And if Kari can put my email in the chat, that'd be great. And we'll continue this conversation. But thank you for asking. That's exactly, Linda, who I was hoping to find today, just because I do know And I've been on the nursing side, not being able to put my chaplain hat on. And although as nurses, we do a lot of spiritual care in that situation as well. But, yes, they just say, well, call the chaplain. Well, it's not exactly, the chaplain is like, be a know-it-all and know everything and for all people. So hopefully today you'll leave with a few tools, and happy to have this conversation with you, continue this conversation. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Shall I just speak?
Go ahead, yeah.
So, both Margaret and Lily, I'm wondering how you integrate the already acceptable rituals in each religion for perinatal loss. Or if they don't have them, or if they do have them, how do you integrate the work that you've done today? Like, let's say you have a Jewish family and they have lost a child. How do you deal with them?
Well,
Or a Catholic child?
Yeah, it's a great question because, it doesn't fit a box. It's an individual, and people in their Judaism, in their Catholicism are, walking a very individual journey. So it's not, I just have to do some deep listening and really sit with and learn their understanding and learn what they, what they need most. And that's why it's so important to take time. Sometimes, it won't be right. You only have one chance to do it. So you can help them that much. And other times, you may be able to meet with them several more times. But that one page of the tools, if I don't get to see them ever again, I do sit with them and kind of give them that blank page of tools. And it's going to be, you can pick this up again, after, because this will be published on the YouTube channel. So you'll be able to see those slides. But it's the importance of asking that set of questions and guiding them, and then asking them, how does this matter to you spiritually? Is there guilt around this? Is there, do you have support? So pretty much the same grief questions you would ask, but it's also very, very tender. And, also just then it's tuning into each of their losses and, individually and as a couple, and, and what support they may need. You want to say anything more about that, Lily?
I think you just said that so well, Margaret. Ultimately, even if, we are with a person of faith, with a particular religion, we need to dig into, their understanding of their faith and exploring any parts that there is, ambivalence or, disconnect too for people. And it's usually at these times of crisis are usually when these issues rise to the surface, and that's exactly what an interfaith minister is trained to do, is to meet people where they are, with faith or without, in any spot in between, to help them discern for themselves what is most calling for support at that time. But yeah, we have to be sensitive to their traditions. And again, the tools I think that we presented today really can travel well amidst any tradition or none.
Across traditions. I'm noting the time, and I know we have a million questions probably, but let's take a moment to close this sacred time, because we've touched on some big things. So let's be mindful of our own souls and spirits.
we close this evening, just want to thank all the guides that showed up in support. Want to honor all those lives who have come to try on life briefly. Want to just honor all those who grieve those whose lives were visited briefly, and for all the hidden grief that is yet to be healed, that there may be a space moving forward to find a voice of compassion and to find healing and wholeness. And for those of us who face being called into the situations, that we call upon our guides and call upon whomever the support needs to be in that time to create the sacred space and usher the safe journey of that child back to the infinite and to source. Blessings to all those who have been present today, and with love and compassion, if you have experienced this in your life, in some relational life of yours in some measure or another, and that this conversation may be a support for you and for all that you do and all the people that you support in the future. And may it be so. Thank you.
May it be so. Thank you so much, from both of you, Margaret and Lily. I'd like to invite us to unmute and just offer thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you so much.
It's amazing.
Thank you, ladies.